This podcast is a part of the More Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Daily Leader Podcast by Pattern Talent, where we interview great leaders and we seek to understand leadership. I'm Brad McDonald.
And I'm Taylor Jessup, and we really hope that you enjoy this episode. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another amazing episode of the Daily Leader, where we're going to be curious and seek to understand leadership. My name is Taylor Jessup. Here is my co-host, Brad McDonald, and we are just super excited that you've come on this journey with us again today. As always, a few of our shout outs that we always do. Jesus with Video Pilot. April Norris does all of our music. It's fantastic if you want to touch base with her. All of that is in our show notes. And Ellery May, our sponsor, whose shop is closed at the moment because she's got 2 little babies coming on the way. So do I. But we are super excited for another episode of the Daily Leader. Before we get started, if you do like the Daily Leader, if you are part of our groupies, you know, you've buzzed it into your hair and your hair says Daily Leader, or you've got the DLP t-shirts. Those don't exist, but I think they should be coming soon,
Yeah,
right?
We're working on it.
Yeah, work in progress. If you would take a minute and hit, smash, whatever you want to call it, that like or subscribe button, that would mean the world to us. Really, really helps us. So,
Indeed.
Hey, that is enough of me blabbing on.
I'm excited
and giving
today,
an
man.
intro. I'm excited today too. We got a special guest.
We do.
I think you should introduce our guest. You and our guest go back a lot longer than me and our guest go back.
I would love to. Yes, you guys have known each other for 30 minutes now, which is awesome.
Which is it's been some of the best 30 minutes of my life.
And actually, that's a really great segue, because I think one of the things that excites me about the opportunity to do this podcast is we've just been reconnecting with different relationships, and forming new relationships. And so this is one here with John Hightower, our guest today, where we've known each other for a long time, quite a few years now, and our paths have crossed in multiple ways. But this is probably the most time that we've gotten together just one-on-one in a setting like this. So I'm excited because I'm getting to know you a lot better, and I'm getting to learn about your work with Frazier Deeter and your work with Tower, and just more about who you are as a guy. And so it's a lot of fun. In way of introduction, I want to kind of give a quick resume and help you guys understand the context that John is coming from and how he thinks, because that'll really set the stage for a fun conversation we're going to have today, which is going to give you guys an awesome perspective on what leadership looks like in the world of consulting, in the world of customer experience, operational excellence, employee experience, M&A, growth, and we're just going to cover it all. Let's do it. So John originally studied management at Georgia Tech. He then got his MBA at Auburn. So if you're an Auburn fan, this is where you get excited and leave a comment for us here. Oh. We know that the Auburn fans.
That's right.
That's right. Throw a little war eagle
watch
in
out
there.
for the Alabama people. You know.
That's right. We always love that rivalry. In addition to that, he did some executive education at HBR Online, which you shared some of that with me, and I'm really excited to see how that comes through today in our conversation as well. He was a VP in a lot of sales and growth roles, so that original role at ARC Systems, and then from there went to LeaderCast, which I think is just an awesome organization, and I know that was an incredible experience for you, where you did sales, and then went to Addo Worldwide and served there with partnerships and process, and then finally co-founded Tower, and through his role at Tower, ended up merging and being acquired by Frazier Deeter, where now you serve as the Chief Growth Officer. So I love that trajectory. I love the sales, the partnership, the growth, and also just the hands-on experience you've had with clients all over the nation and now across the world. And so, man, tell us your story. Fill in some of the blanks there from that resume.
Absolutely. Well, congratulations, guys. This is really cool. It's an honor to be on the podcast. I've listened to the ones you posted, and it's just great to be here. And Brad, we did connect actually through another common connection we had, and that just speaks to the value of relationship. One of Frazier Deeter's core principles that we believe in and our values is people. And we talk very frequently about investing in relationships to make a difference. And that's what I want to do today with the listeners out there, is we want to make an impactful difference with y'all talking about some of these leadership concepts. Personally, I'm married a beautiful woman. So grateful for her. She is part of this story, so I have to lead with that because it's an honor to walk with her as well as my 2 daughters through life, and they're part of what I've been able to do in regards to serving clients and building something with amazing team members. It has been, I'm starting my 3rd decade of helping leaders through either unique challenges or growth opportunities, and it's been a huge amount of fun. And just want to share a few principles today. And I have had the opportunity to work in all parts of the country, and I'm glad to be back in Arizona, sitting down here with you all today. So excited about the day.
Yeah.
I'm a little bit of a stained glass window, if that's a mental picture for you, for my career.
Yep.
A lot of brokenness, a lot of challenges. But when you take a step back and you see all these pieces of glass come together, it's a beautiful mosaic. And I'm really eager to see where it ends in my life. But definitely want to share some of the challenges as well as the things that have gone well in today's conversation.
Man,
That's awesome.
That's awesome. I love that picture. It's really well said, of a stained glass window and being like, hey man, here's all of my different experiences, and that makes up this beautiful picture. And sometimes if you looked at just one, right, it may not, it may just look like a lot of pain, but when you put it all together, there's just kind of this beautiful story. So
yeah, I appreciate that, right? Because we all come into probably our careers with high expectations, and the next thing you know, something happens. The economy crashes, or you had something go sideways, and rather than like hide that dust and that broken glass underneath a coffee table or somewhere, I'd probably brush it in. I want to bring that out and say, hey, what do we learn from this? What do we learn from that brokenness, but also celebrate, like, hey, we're building something beautiful here.
Yeah. I relate to that a lot, and I'm sure Brad does too, but I relate to people way more that are able to share their brokenness than those that just tell the victory highlight reel, right? And like kind of leave that out. It's just something that's not very human about that. We don't make movies about that. You know, we don't go like, hey, look at this movie of this person who had no adversity or who made no mistakes, right? That doesn't really connect on a human level. So I think that was a super beautiful illustration. So I really appreciate
it reminds me actually of one of my favorite parts of one of my favorite books, which is Integrity by Dr. Henry Cloud. And in that book, it talks about how leaders actually make connections with the people who follow them. And one of the 4 principles it gives is this idea that they present coping models, right? So to be a leader means not that I sweep things under the rug and sort of have this, perfect facade, right, or mask, but instead it means that I show people what it looks like to be an imperfect but coping person who's making it through all the same challenges in life, loss, grief, success. It's the peaks and the valleys, and we get to demonstrate for people, to be a demonstration of what it means to be like a healthy coping model. And so leadership starts there. And I know that that's been a part of your journey in many ways. So
yeah, we just seem to get that so backwards. I feel like with leadership in particular, right? We look for leaders to have it all together rather than to be honest about like when they don't or when they haven't or whatever their experience is.
I totally agree, Taylor. I think that we incentivize people to be performative, and there's time to perform, right? We all know that that's important. There's financial performance. There's things that we have to perform. But man, what does it look like when we as leaders take the first step of vulnerability and say, hey, we're performing right now with a hand tied behind our back, or with some grief or some loss or some pain, or alcoholism or divorce or other challenges that may be affecting the members on our team. And so when we start to look at, caring for people, which I know is a big part of that employee experience conversation we'll have this morning, it all starts with leaders who actually have self-awareness and have the ability to expose those areas of themselves. So I'm excited about that.
When it hits on something that Jim and I are both well read, I've listened to y'all's content.
Well, Patrick, we're working on Taylor.
I can read on occasion. Sure.
It's a lot of audible.
Hey, listening with my ears, that's something I'm learning more to do, is listening with my ears. Right?
I've had a lot of counseling about that. I'm working on that.
Well, if you look back in history, that's how a lot of things were passed down.
That's right.
Right?
Yeah.
Even going back to millennial, things were passed down through orators, if you will. I'm a big believer in the power of story, which we'll talk about a little bit. But going back to what we're talking about, vulnerability-based trust. I mean, Patrick Lencioni is one of my favorites. All of his books are awesome. Getting naked is actually mandatory reading for Hightower employees. Like before you start on, like that is the first thing we ask you to do. But when you look at his methodologies, it starts at the vulnerability-based trust level. For all high-performance teams, you can talk about all the different leadership folks out there, but that's one that's really interesting to me. Is this, hey, you have to have that vulnerability and that trust to work with one another to really hit the kind of pinnacle of performance for your team overall.
Yeah, so I trust you as my leader when I know that you bleed as well.
Sure.
I think it's super interesting because at least I've experienced this before in the past of like, if I perceive that my leader is perfect, it does two things for me. I don't know about your guys' experience, and I like this tangent, so I just wanted to stay here for a minute, is one, it makes it not very relatable because I'm like, man, like, okay, this person's perfect and I'm making a whole bunch of mistakes. And two, I feel immense pressure and not necessarily freedom. Because if the expectation is perfection rather than growth, then that seems to actually confine me in what I'm able to do, right? So it messes up my trust for that person. I don't trust them because I'm like, man, I know this person's not perfect. They're just not showing me that. And there may be a healthy, right? We don't need to tell every single secret. That's not the expectation.
There's boundaries for sure.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I don't need to tell you all those things, but to be, vulnerable in that sense, like I connect so much better with people that are willing to be vulnerable. And there is that like trust that's made there. And then it does seem to kind of melt away for the teams. Like, hey, you don't have to be perfect. I actually want you, I want you to work hard enough that you are making mistakes, right? Like,
totally.
Rather than do everything perfectly, get in line, like this is how we do it, this is how we run our company or
organization. And I think we put a lot of times in business, we talk about the pursuit of perfection. Sure. And it's huge in hospitality where you've done a ton of work, and it should be. Because of the clients and the customers that we're serving, they deserve a pursuit of perfection. But I think sometimes we put way too much emphasis on perfection and not enough on pursuit. And the pursuit piece of that is where the vulnerability can come into play. And it's where real, true performance can come alive. So this is a fun tangent.
Oh, that's good.
Not in my notes, but definitely worth
that's all right.
camping
that's all right.
in.
So, okay, stories. I know you like stories. So I'd love to know kind of like share more of the story behind like Hightower and the Frazier and Deeter acquisition. Love to know more about that, how that kind of came about. What's the story there?
Sure. So 2017, there was opportunity to start a business, and it was something that Brad alluded to. It had been at some great organizations, but it never had part of the action at the ownership level. And it was a really cool opportunity to start something. And we had to pivot almost right out of the gate. We wanted to be a software company, and we had to pivot quickly. The funding did not come, and we had to consult. I had very young children at that time, and that's the game I knew. So let's go. And it was a ton of fun, and we had some early wins with a very well-known brand, and that led to wins with some mid-market companies, and next thing you know, we're off to the races. And for the next few years, it was how do we serve people, meet them where they are, how do we connect, how do we help with people, how do we help with projects, and that was our calling card. People were aware of some of the brands we worked with, and we just started to work with more and more organizations, and we came across some studies around 18 months in, and we needed to pivot to have a point of view. And in the professional services space, especially consulting, people will say they'll do anything versus like, hey, let's establish what we're going to be known for. And we saw three things. One, we saw something called the experience economy, a study on that. Two, you mentioned LeaderCast. I got to know Bill McDermott, the CEO of, at the time, SAP. He's now over at ServiceNow. SAP made a very key acquisition that was really interesting. And then people had asked about two brands that we had studied at a very deep level, Chick-fil-A and the Ritz-Carlton. So this experience economy piece I'll touch on. But really what had been happening is that industries overall have changed. And the mechanics of what people were experiencing was changing quickly. So we said, hey, there's something going on in the experience economy that we need to be thoughtful about. An example of that is 80% of CEOs feel like they give a great experience, and only 8% of customers agree. Let that hit. Yeah. Right. So I'm a CEO. I get that. Like, am I giving a great experience? How do I know? Am I talking to my customers? And then 8% of my customers agree. There's a delta. There's a gap there that we got to be thoughtful about. So that study was done by PwC. It was a really interesting study. And then we saw SAP acquire Qualtrics. And if you're not familiar with it, it's a technology platform out of Provo, Utah, which traditionally does not hit the radars of many tech, kind of tech startup spaces. And they measured customer data, employee data, and operational data. And we said, wow, they made a very large bet on Qualtrics. Yep. So we saw this customer experience really tied with the employee experience. And we started to see a lot of things happening at the macro level. And then if you really examine Chick-fil-A and the Ritz-Carlton, they're known for their customer experience. Most folks have had the opportunity to enjoy the Chick-fil-A customer experience. Some have enjoyed the Ritz, and they're both known for their employees. Chick-fil-A has My Pleasure, and the Ritz-Carlton has a ton of different things, including their Credo card that outlines everything that they have as expectations and standards. Yep. But one of the things that I appreciate about both of them is continuous improvement. Like, if you look at Chick-fil-A and you look at the Ritz-Carlton, they're always looking for ways to improve their business, right? And having an engineering background, at least gone to Georgia Tech, I was like, how do we put that into our business model? So really we came out with this CX, so customer experience, employee experience, and operational excellence model, CX, EX, and OX, to have a little bit of branding there. And if you think about it holistically, we now can help a marketing officer, a chief people officer, and a COO. We had bank of work underneath each one of those practice areas, and that was our point of view. And we got connected to Frazier Deeter, which is an accounting firm and focused traditionally in helping people with their taxes, and their business model had grown where they had begun to help businesses. And then over the past 42 years old now, they continue to grow the service lines. And over the past half decade, consulting services really started to come more and more into the light of that industry overall. Frazier Deeter had started that a decade and a half ago. And we got connected with them, and they said, hey, we really like your model. We culturally, the people, the founders at Arch and Tower, we really enjoyed getting to know Frazier Deeter. So we merged in 2020. 1/1/2020, we became partners at Frazier Deeter through the acquisition. And it has been a blast to work with over the past, what is now going on 5 years. It's been a crazy ride. And we're excited about the future. We are looking holistically. How do we solve challenges? Now, not only in the chief marketing officer, the chief people officer, the COO, now we can help the chief technology officer, which we'll talk about digital transformation, but now your CFO and your CEO, we can go in full ribbon business transformation, soup to nuts, and help you across the board. And we've got great case studies to share around helping private equity-backed companies, publicly traded companies, family-owned businesses, and startups, like emerging brands. Like, we work with some great food concepts even in Atlanta that have said, hey, how do we go from 4 to 15 units? And how do we package this up for maybe an equity play a little bit later? And working on those challenges and opportunities, I mean, I love it. We were talking about, we spend 80% of our time
That's right.
working with the people that we do life with, and 20% of the time at home. So I better enjoy what I'm doing. I'm not going to apologize for it. I'm going to own the space I've been planted in and say, man, let's have fun, but let's be wise about what we're doing, how we're doing it, and how we're leading out in that space. Yeah. So I don't know if you have any questions on that, but that's like a bit of the story. It's been a ton of fun to work through it. We've got this 7-point framework that we're working through business transformation with clients every day, and just excited to take that message to the world.
I love I've learned so much about the kind of the philosophy underlying Arch and Tower, but I think one of the key aspects of that is just your brand. I love the idea of Arch and Tower. Can you tell us a little bit about what that means to your team and what it means to your clients?
Yeah. I mean, I remember we went through a rebrand. Our initial name, there wasn't really a brand story behind it, and it was tough to say. And when you think about your customer experience, you want them to find you easily. Let's not put up a friction point early on.
Yeah. Sure.
So the transition came for me to lead the previous named company, and now we said, hey, let's rebrand. And I'll be honest, for 2 weeks, I was coming up with some really bad names, man. They were terrible. But I wanted to innovate. I wanted to go. And one of my partners, he's awesome. He's since moved on. I'm so grateful for him. He said, give me the weekend. I was like, okay, you got the weekend. And then if not, we're going with one of these bad names. And I remember being at the airport, and I got 3 names. And I remember he sent this one, was Arch and Tower. Arches span gaps and carry weight. And towers lift you up to give you a strategic vantage point. And that's what we want to do. We want to de-silo situations. So think about a business transformation project, which if we get in the weeds, we can. But like traditionally, there's silos in most organizations. So how do we de-silo an organization? How do we get executives talking with one another? And then how can we help them maybe take a different look at things? How can we give them a strategic vantage point? So that's the brand story behind Arch and Tower. I'm very grateful in that leadership lesson of letting someone else speak into something when you're like hard charging, because it's been beautiful. Frazier Deeter actually through the acquisition said, we actually want to keep your name. If you're good with that. I said, this is amazing. And I'm very grateful for them honoring that piece. And now we, Frazier Deeter, Arch and Tower, we're building something beautiful together and excited about where our next 42 years are going to go.
That's really cool. And one of the things I'm most excited about as we've talked and prepared for this interview with you, John, is this new role that you're serving in and how you get to kind of release some of the work that you were doing before to different team members and then go chart this new path with Frazier and Deeter at large that's going to lead you to some global conversations you've been longing to have and feeling called to. Tell us a little bit about what the future holds, at least from this vantage point.
Yeah. So from my perspective, the leadership lesson that we just kind of glazed over was a transition of taking what was something that for the past 7 years been every day leading that out to handing the daily operations over to my partner Chris Green, who I'm so thankful for, and he's gonna crush it. He already is crushing it. But that was a transition, and having team members to lean into, and having the people that you can trust to hand over the operations and looking behind the back for you, and they're way better at it than I am. But having that transitional period has been interesting, and moving into a growth role where we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like. I can give you some general framework around what we're working on. When you think about growth, especially in an accounting space or in private equity or in some of these other more hard-charging industries, consulting, people really can focus on the numbers. What's the net present value? What's this going to do for our shareholders? We gloss over the why. Why do we want to grow? And really harnessing the value in story. We talked about that really briefly, but you can't charge into change management without really understanding what's the value proposition for all involved. Is this good for my community? Is this good for the world? Is this good for my employees? Is this good for my customers? Is this good for the organization overall? And answering those, not necessarily in that order, right? That's one thing I've learned from Horst is you got to think what is most important for our shareholders, what's most important for our employees, our clients, our community, and the world, and really being thoughtful about that. So I'm excited about where we're going. We maybe can get into specifics a little bit later, but we are looking at, hey, how do we continue to grow our ecosystem of relationships so that we can add value to our clients? At the end of the day, we want to be that one call where they're saying, hey, here's my challenge, can you help me? And sometimes that could be a business challenge. I took a call last week from one of my I love working with this person, and the person called me with a personal challenge. And just being able to help someone walk through that, I'm not going to charge time to that. That's something where I get to pour into someone, and give them points of view that they may or may not agree with, but in those moments, that's what it's about.
Look, John, if you need to charge me for that call, I understand. Taylor does it all the time.
Yeah, I do. I charge you for all your time. Why would I not? No, that's great. I love those questions that you're asking. And I just point this out, and I'll let Brad keep going because I know he's got more thoughts here for sure. But I just find it interesting in all those questions. The question did not come up, and not saying that it's not important, but hey, what's most important for my bottom line was not necessarily the question that we ask. It's just interesting when you start thinking about and you talk to leaders that have gone through transitions and a lot of this time, they're not as often concerned with what's my bottom line as opposed to what's most important for my team, the shareholders, all the people involved, and the byproduct ends up becoming, hey, if you take care of all those things, the bottom line is often there. So it's not that it isn't a question. I just find that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I mean, Dr. Henry Cloud talks about leaders leave a wake. Think of a boat, of results and relationships.
Yep.
And people want to make people choose the binary. Is it 1 or 0? Is it results or is it relationships? It's actually both.
Yeah.
Like a lot of things in life, it's paradoxes, right? You have to hold them in tension. And really it is, hey, we're going this way on this boat. We're going to go to these ports of calls. This is where we're headed. But let's be wise about the resources on how we get there. We talked about paddlers, passengers, and pirates, which is a concept I'm working on of, hey, how do you look at your organization and your employee base and being thoughtful about how you carve those wakes of results and relationships as you go to your destination. Yeah. Now, it takes fuel, resources, money, all those things, but if you make them about that solely, you're gonna tip your boat over. It's just a matter of time.
Yeah.
May not happen now, may not happen in 5 years, may not happen in a decade, but at some point that'll catch up with you. So how do you ride that tension?
Yeah.
Because the financial returns are extremely important, but you have to hold them in the tensions of how are we going to make this work?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. You can't just put everything into one or the other.
Right.
It's got to be a both and.
And that's a challenge of leadership.
That's right.
Is it a problem to solve or is it a tension to manage?
Yeah.
Chris Green always says that.
That's so good. Yeah. Let's laser in on that. So, John, what is leadership?
Yeah, well, I mean, it depends. We want the one-liners, right? Leadership's influence, Maxwell. You got leadership's the force multiplier. Colin Powell.
Sure.
Yes.
You got, everything rises and falls on leadership. Like we can hit all those, and like those are all great. And I love all the content.
They all had their moment where they were really helpful to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I love all those quotes. And I am not at that point in my career. I can just tell you about like the influences in my life and extract leadership out of that. Because for me, it's a very personal thing, the leadership side. And for me, what I want is to show up consistently to be able to align with my personal mission, which is I want to encourage people to excellence. And I want to show behaviors that are going to help people get there. And so for me, I have to look at leaders in my life, starting with growing up with my mom and dad. My mom was a nurse. My dad was a home builder. He's still in real estate and helping people where they were, right? That was something I learned at a very early age. It was like, let's just help people where they are. And when you're talking about a hospital and a home, you can't get any more relational than that. Giving people room to explore and fail was a huge leadership thing for me. The area to explore gave me opportunities to expand my skill sets, right? You touched on, hey, we trust gives that someone the opportunity to go out and do things, challenge things. And if you fail, it's okay, right? Within context. Now let's make new mistakes is something like this year, but giving people the opportunity to do that is awesome, right?
I just don't want my wife to, we might need to cut that out. I don't want her to get that line. Brad, let's make new mistakes.
Yeah. Because I'm really good at making the same.
Right? Yeah. That's so good though.
Yeah.
That's so good. So it happens within context. Let's make new mistakes.
Yeah. Because the setback's the first step to the comeback. I forgot which content guy said that. I would like to take credit for it, but it's not.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
we'll
hey,
give it to you for today.
Yeah,
I'll
just
take that. I'll take that. But it is one of those things where a lot of leadership comes through those challenges you have to overcome. You almost learn more in the valley than you do the mountaintop. Yeah. It's fun to celebrate at the mountaintop. I don't want to be in the valley long.
Sure.
But man, I've learned a lot in the valley. Yeah.
And that's so good. There's a Puritan prayer, and it's in this book called The Valley of Vision, and it's literally it's like the first page, and it's the only prayer in the book that I've read, which we could talk about whatever that means later, but it's so good. And one of the things that it says in the prayer is essentially like the darker the valley, the brighter the stars, the moon, the sun. Like the darker the darkness, right? Yeah. The brighter the light. And I think that as leaders, we have this incredible opportunity as we talk about vision, which is, I think we'd all agree is one of the key components of being a leader is you have to have some sense of vision that you're oriented towards. To your point, the ship is sailing in a certain direction and there's at least some version of clarity there, even if it's maybe not very far out.
Sure.
And so I totally agree. It's in the context of challenges and difficulties that, showing up for people every day, being a demonstration of excellence for them is absolutely critical. When you look at your work right now at Frazier and Deeter, some of the work that's going on at Arch and Tower, where you're the co-founder, how are you guys going about leadership development within your own organization?
Yeah, this is a great one. And one of the leadership things that I wanted to touch on, because it plays directly to that point, is something I learned from Horst Schulze, founder of the Ritz-Carlton. He actually is an expert in residence with us at Arch and Tower. He offices literally right next to us. And he plays the long game. And that's something I've had to learn. Like, I'm in this thing 2 decades, start my 3rd decade. What's it look like a decade from now? You can usually accomplish more in the decade than you can a year. You overset your expectations for a year, but you underset your expectations for a decade. And thinking in that context, Horst plays a long game. He talks about vision. We're never going to achieve this vision, but we're going to work to be it. Okay. And then he takes care of himself. The guy, we celebrated him on LinkedIn a couple weeks ago. He turned 85.
I saw that.
And like hugging that guy's neck, he's in an office still going hard at 85.
Yeah.
And he's a huge inspiration to me, but I've learned to play the long game. And it comes down to vision. It comes down to having a compelling vision and value system. So for us at Arch and Tower, one of the things we do, we have 2 rituals that we hold dearly that we recently have gone through. We have multiple ones, but the first one is at the beginning of the year. We take 2 days and we don't shut down the business. We focus on the business. We close the doors and we talk about why are we here? And then we talk about who we're working with. We get to know each other a little bit better. Maybe it's a personality profile. Maybe it's a story that we're sharing. We dig in and really continue to connect with one another. Even if we've heard these stories time and time again, it's good to reflect on that and reflect on where you've been, the challenges you've been through, the celebrations that you have. We celebrate people that have bought homes and had babies and got married and did all these fun things, got promoted, right?
Yeah.
And then we focus on what are our big moves for the year? What are the strategic things we're going to say yes to? And what are the things we're going to say no to if they don't fall into our strategic vision and our alignment of where we're going? And I believe that gives people a bit of direction. It gives them orientation. And then we have standards. I mean, we took kind of that inspiration of the Ritz-Carlton and came up with 20 standards that we want to hold ourselves to. The founders, we looked back in our past and said, what do we want to do differently in consulting? How do we codify that and create stories and values and standards that resonate?
That's good.
So for example, enter the arena. If you've read Teddy Roosevelt's quote and about how people are in the arena, right? Yeah. It's easier to be in the stands and really take in the blows in the middle of the arena. That means you're going to enter into a tough conversation. Yep. And we agree to that, right? You're joining me in this journey at Arch and Tower. We need to have a tough conversation. We're in the arena here in a moment. Right? We're going to talk about fan of the brand. How do we talk about our brand and we make it almost like, wow, something's going on different there. Like I want to be a part of that. Yeah. I'm a swag guy. I love a lot of swag. And one standard that I'm having to work on this year is being healthy. Psychologically, spiritually, physically, emotionally, mentally, right? And people now hold me accountable to that inside specifically the groups, the Arch and Tower and the advisory group that we're in Frazier Deeter. We as leaders said, hey, I need help in this. Hold me accountable to this team. Be that be a frontline person, a new associate, or a senior partner. Like, hey, make sure if you see me being unhealthy, call me out on that. So that I think the first one is that.
Yeah. That's super good. Yeah. I have a love-hate with the first thing you talked about, which is like, hey, the long game, right?
Oh man.
Because if I was to be honest, like I want the results in 10 years today.
Right.
Like, I don't know about you guys, but I want to go to the gym and I want to be in shape tomorrow, right? Yeah. But I think that's so important, casting that vision for, hey, where do we want to be in 10 years? And then breaking that down and spending time with our team. And how do we make sure that, hey, our vision is aligned? How do we make sure that we're holding each other accountable? How do we make sure that we are creating these raving fans that like people want to be a part of it? Like getting down on that really granular level and making sure we're kind of all marching in the same direction with that as kind of like the overarching theme, right? Of where do we want to go in the long run? Because it is a long game. It's typically longer than any game that I ever want to play. Most of my endeavors, every overnight success, right? There's thousands and thousands of hours that we don't see. But I feel like at least in our culture and context for myself, it's just microwave culture. I think that was just super important of like, man, if I can't do it in the next month or in the next day or in the next year, then I'm not going to do it at all. And I'm going to jump ship and go to the next thing.
Well, and I think you're touching on something really important here, and that's empathy with your employees and empathy with other leaders, right? What I've had to find, I had to anchor on that decade situation. I'd actually turned 40, and I took New Year's week and just said, what's the next decade look like?
Yeah.
My daughters were entering to the age where that next decade was going to be the most impactful decade because I only had a decade left with them. And in my worldview, this is generational impact because the generational impact that I pass on to my daughters, if we are blessed with grandchildren and so forth and so on, those generations upon generations upon generations, I have the chance to break things off that I don't want. I have things to to harvest things that I want out of the generations. And it took that moment to be like, okay, what are we gonna do? My wife and I getting on the same page, business-wise, family, finances, all that stuff. But to your point on leaders, I believe we have so much hard driving natures in us that we don't give ourselves grace. We don't give ourselves empathy to be like, you know what? I'm doing the best I can. I'm not gonna be lazy. We're not wired that way.
Yeah.
But we traditionally don't give ourselves enough grace to like let ourselves breathe.
Yeah.
And when you breathe and you give yourself some space, innovation comes, ideas come, vision comes, and then you can really start to execute.
Yeah.
So I just don't want to bypass that point because I'm there frequently, weekly.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. And the grace to be able to breathe, because for me, I can get real stressed out and tense when I'm not giving myself that grace. Yeah. And rather than that encouraging me to perform better, I actually just kind of, it's like choke. It's like you're watching an athlete, which Brad knows so much about, and they're playing a game and you're like, man, they got to make the next few shots to pull this off. And you just watch that pressure go down because they haven't had a good game, rather than those that have gone, screw it, I haven't had a good game today. But all I got to do is keep making the next shot, keep taking the next shot. So that I'd love to pivot just a little bit, but in this kind of same vein. So what I want to know is, okay, so what is critical for leaders to understand about business transformation and what is that?
Yeah. So I think there's four things. One's value. I think when you look at the macro level, if you look at your product or service and it's not next level, it's not an experience, it's more of a commodity or like just not that great, there's usually a 16% price premium if you can elevate to an experience. So there's like a bottom, I'm gonna go straight at the bottom line now. If you create business transformation and you're thinking about your solution in that spectrum, there's a price premium regardless of industry. That's not my research, that's Price Waterhouse. And we talked about that experience gap that leaders are seeing. The CEOs, they think they're doing awesome. Their customers are saying something different, and there's that huge gap. So when you think about the value of change and, I need to be thinking about this business and transforming it, you also look at what's going on at the velocity of change. Okay? Just think about the past 5 years. We had COVID, then we had supply chain issues, then we had the Great Resignation. Now I've got multiple generations within my business. Then I have AI, ML, then I got ChatGPT. By the way, it's an election year.
That's right.
And we've all done this.
I'm getting left side numbness right now after that list.
All right, I'm going to pass out. I'm going to pass out.
Through the longest bull run.
The stock
market has been running hard. For about 16 or 17 years. I was talking about this at a conference a while back. Like that's the velocity of change. So you've got to be thinking as leaders how you stand in front of it. And then the silos. We talked about this in explaining the arch and tower.
That's right.
Like as leaders, you have to think about your business transformation in a cross-functional nature. If you don't, the shareholders should be asking the executives really hard questions because you're leaving money on the table if you're not talking holistically about what you're trying to do as a business. So value, velocity, silos, and the most important one, psychology of change. Chris Green, business partner, he talks about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. When you're going through change, people are not quite sure what this means. So if you don't have a culture of change, like we're going to talk about continuous improvement and almost make it a value, people go down to the bottom layer of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which is security, survival. Those are the bottom layers, and they're in this constant flux of what's going on here versus we're going to make it part of our corporate culture. So when I talk about business transformation, those are four like the high level things that you need to be thinking about as a leader. So not sure where that resonates with y'all, but those are things, just topics.
It reminds me of a book that I've been using with a lot of clients called Sooner, Safer, Happier. And it's written by a guy named Jonathan Smart. He's out of the UK. And one of the things that he highlights in his book, and I can't remember the name of this tool right now, but it shows the bell curve between laggards and innovators. Are you familiar with what I'm talking about?
Very familiar, yep.
And something that resonates with me as I'm working with clients all the time is that we are leading people on both ends of that entire spectrum.
Yep.
And so we have to be able, as we're dealing with change, to guide and direct the people who are really aggressive and eager to change, and also encourage and bring along those who are really lagging and really just stressed. Emotionally, they have serious blocks to something as simple as, hey, we're not using this piece of software anymore. We're using this piece of software because of the implications. How are you guys, just if we can hone in on this for a moment, helping clients be successful through the leadership of that vast array of
Great question. And you gave number two of the three things I would say. Number one is you have the culture that's ready for it, right? Because people just want to do change all of a sudden, especially leaders that are visionary and saw something on AI. Let's do it. Well,
pivot.
hold on. That's a shiny object. Let's think about the strategy of what we want to do and where the shiny tool fits into an overall strategy. Let's think about the culture that we're creating, but then hitting exactly what you talked about, the law of diffusion of innovation.
Yes.
Where you've got
Thank you.
you got innovators, you got early adopters, you got early majority, you got late majority, and then you got the laggards.
Right.
Simon Sinek talks a lot about this in his Start With Why talk. But when you think about that in the change management function, what does that mean? You have to be very thoughtful. If you're trying to get laggards to change, that may be a waste of resources or a challenge, or you may be building a really big mountain versus, hey, let's be thoughtful. Are we communicating clearly? This goes back to storytelling. Are we talking about the ERP system that's going to be changing? Well, let's start talking about it well before we even look at ERP. It's like, what are we trying to do strategically? Then as you move forward, you can think about the early adopters. You can think about the innovators, inviting them in to see, hey, what are we doing here? What would you like to see? Because you know you're going to trip over 2.5 or 3% of people just because they're in that Z-score that is like, hey, I really want to do change. But then you're going to be really thoughtful. We help guide clients through this change management process because it's such a huge topic that very few folks talk about, especially in the digital world, because there's a cliff. We go roll out this new technology and just drops off, adoption's terrible, whatever, versus how do we be thoughtful about change management? How do we create an internal marketing message around it? How do we create a communication plan, almost internal communications that's coming down the pipe, and really being thoughtful about all those pieces?
You mentioned digital. This is probably a great moment for us to talk about that because I know it's a key part of what you guys do.
Yep.
How and why is understanding digital transformation just absolutely critical for leaders right now?
Well, I think it's not, it's accelerating every part of business. You can think Amazon, you can think, even Delta. I'm brand loyal there. One, because I live in Atlanta, but two, they got a killer customer experience. They take care of me because they know my information, right?
I left Georgia. I moved out here. I still got the Delta card. I still fly Delta.
Yeah.
And I'm like, everybody else out here is like, why are you Delta?
Yeah,
like Southwest.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I can't undo it. It's too
premium,
late.
Price premium.
I know.
Right?
I know.
It's a commodity.
Yeah.
But when you think about those
just
type
love
of
Delta.
experiences, now what are our clients experiencing?
That's
this. So what are they holding us to? That's standard. What are our employees holding us to? That's standard. I need the information from my systems fast so I can make decisions to serve the clients. That's what my employees are saying, right? So when you think about digital, you leaders, we have to be thoughtful about it. But here's what leaders do. They see the coolest thing on their Facebook feed or their YouTube feed or their LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever. They're like, hey, I need to apply that technology in my business. And it's the shiny object driving the strategy versus the strategy driving the shiny object. So we're always going to start with strategy. What are you trying to do? Let's be thoughtful. What's your growth strategy? Then let's see how technology can enable that. Let's see what your current technology stack looks like. A lot of times we'll go into an organization, they've got multiple dozens of different technologies. And when we guide them through, we have a very, very quick diagnostic. We spend 2 days with folks, canvassing their whole business. They come back with a strategic plan. And one of those modules is specifically around technology. And when you start to open up people's eyes and de-silo the conversation, people are like, I had no clue we had 30 different technologies. I had no clue that 15 of them are disconnected from one another, and we have manual processes to export data over here, move data over here, et cetera, et cetera. It's a mess. So lead with a strategy, think through the culture you want to create, and then the change management function is so key. And so usually the one that's overlooked or waited to last, and it actually should be the starting point.
Man, that is awesome.
Yeah.
I love everything you just said. Just blew my mind. I'm stealing it from my clients.
Hey, it's great. Hey, we were building a digital practice at FD. We've been working with clients for the past couple of decades on digital security, and we're coming full force to help clients in this space, and super excited about the case studies we've already built, the clients we've already worked with, and continuing to scale that offering out because it's needed. Every company is touching technology.
Yeah.
So.
Why do we have the shiny object syndrome? Like chasing after technology.
That's such a good question.
Before we're thinking about how does it really fit in with our culture and our team and where we want to go. Like why do we do that?
Yeah, I think there's two ways you can go here. Culturally, right? Culturally, we're almost conditioned by they're very sophisticated marketing people out there.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, they're good.
They're good. Let's acknowledge that people market really well.
Yeah, that I don't need.
Then we have the corporate culture of like, hey, this thing will save me X amount of that, whatever, productivity or revenue or whatever. Well, I get marketed really well and my immediate mindset goes here versus having a dialogue to say strategically, where does this all play together? Yeah. I don't know a ton about the psychology behind it all, but that's just what we've seen.
Sure.
You see something hit the market, ChatGPT, right? It's the fastest growing technology subscriber base ever. And now people are throwing a bunch of information in there without thinking, is this ethical? Is this, maybe it's not necessarily unethical, but maybe I'm putting sensitive data in there and I don't have my own environment. So I'm basically putting this out for public usage. And then your employees hear about that. And what are they doing? Doing the same thing, right? So how are we not hitting the pause button? I don't like to say we're slowing down. I like to say we're elevating. We're not slowing down this initiative. We're elevating the initiative to have a strategic conversation about it.
That's good.
Yeah. Right?
That's good. Yeah, because it feels like if we're not implementing that, we're behind. Like, hey, here's the new thing. If I don't put it in, we're behind. But realistically, to elevate the way that we're thinking about it and think strategically about how that fits seems to be a much better way to go about that. Like that is, to me, that's playing the long game that we talked about, right? Not just implementing the next thing, but let's elevate and let's see if that's in line with where we want to go.
Yeah, that's so wise. And I love the tower imagery and the elevate language and how it brings us above the frenetic energy and the frothy mouth around this shiny object syndrome that just destroys businesses. It destroys trust. It erodes trust with employees and leaders. And then downstream from that, we know it erodes trust with clients and customers. Can you give us just a kind of a jet flyby of that kind of, EX, CX, OX philosophy, and just help our listeners understand why that's so important for them to have a sense of as they go about their own leadership?
Yep. So we talked about the gap that CEOs are experiencing. The irony is when you look at the customer experience and employee experience, statistics show 82% of the customer experience is driven by the employee experience. So if you want to take care of your customers, take care of your employees. Pretty straightforward. However, when you double click into the attributes of the customer experience, people care about convenience and they want it fast. Those are operational measures. So the operational is almost the connective tissue between the customer experience and the employee experience. Wow. So when you bring this down to the granular level, one of the things that we do quite frequently is we basically map the customer experience and then we map the employee experience. And the irony is there's so many overlapping points. When you have a room full of executives going through that exercise, they're like, I didn't know you had that data. I didn't know we interacted at that point. And as facilitators of that conversation, we can then come in and say, hey, here's all of what we heard. Do you want to work on this together? Do you want to work on this on your own? What does that look like? But people have a playbook on how to improve and drive those numbers up. I know it's a super quick flyby, but it's the correlation between those two that people don't necessarily, they know it, but when they see it flesh itself out in front of a whiteboard or digital experience or whatever, it changes the game for them.
I love that. Well, Brad, we've got like a billion more questions that we could ask.
I would love to just kind of turn over to you for a minute and just ask you, as you think about our listeners and you think about, a message that's passionate for you and something that you think is just critical for leaders as we march into the future to understand. And you've got the floor. What would you want to share just as a really important parting message and encouragement?
So keep the main thing the main thing. No matter your ecosystem at home, need that be a spouse, need that be a partner, need that be yourself. Just remember you got to take care of that first and hold that tension, that paradox, so true. But because those things are what's important. All the other stuff will start to work itself out. Take care of the home front. Now on the business end, be thoughtful about what you're working on and how is it interacting with all the different parts of the business. As leaders, we're usually forward thinkers and we're not necessarily turning around going, how is all this stuff interconnecting? And maybe you are one of those good integrators. You're one of those great operators that can see that through tea leaves. If you can't, bring that team around you. That's going to be awesome. Trust that team, and usually you have to get out of your own way. Definitely the entrepreneur's dilemma. Usually they're the ones that are the lid, if you will. The whole Maxwell saying, they're the lid to the growth of the business. Yeah. And just be mindful of that. Last thing of this, a bit of advice, have yourself a personal board of directors, people that you can call, people that you can trust. Have people, abandoned brothers or peers that you can call on, share that life with. Here's what I'm going through, and then pour into someone else. Maybe you're reaching down and helping someone, showing them how to get where you are. If you think about it, you're going to get wisdom. You're going to work on things together, and you get to give wisdom in that process. And those things have just been helpful for me throughout my career.
Good. Man, I love that. Okay, ideal target client that you're searching for right now, who is that demographic?
Yeah. So we've had a great time talking today. And some of the cases I'd talk about would be, like I'd mentioned earlier, companies that are in that mid-market, that are in a high growth mode. They may have a business challenge or a growth opportunity they're not quite sure how to tackle. Maybe you're saying, what do I do next? Or, hey, how do I improve my customer and employee experience? We specialize in helping folks that either are stuck in the mud or want to go take that next hill. And it's a ton of fun. We usually go in with a 7-point approach. They get a ton of value out of it. We work across multiple different industries. Usually it's the culture of the company we want to work with. They're hungry, they want to go, or they're just so stuck they don't know how to get out of it. And that's it. We serve a bunch of different industries.
I love it.
Love the mid-market. Emerging companies are great to work with, but usually they're at that point of like, hey, how do I capitalize and get up off the ground? But we're grateful. If you want to follow me on LinkedIn or reach out to me, it's easy to find John Hightower, search Frazier Deeter or Arch and Tower, and I'll come up. And maybe we can leave some contact information and maybe
Absolutely,
a couple of one-pagers in the notes that we can give as a bit of a give to the audience.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
They would value it tremendously.
100%. Yeah. If you didn't get that from there, we will definitely put all of that in the show notes for today. Man, I feel like we could sit here for forever. We'll have to have you back.
Yeah,
This was so much fun, John.
So much fun.
Thank you.
Man. Hey, thank you for taking the time and making the space. Super valuable for myself. I know Brad, all of our listeners. We're really grateful that you took the time to come on today. Yeah. So appreciate that. And with that, I think we're gonna have to wrap up for today. Again, subscribe. It all helps for all of our groupies out there. Share. Hey, we really appreciate. Oh yeah, share.
Comment War Eagle if you're a fellow.
Wow. Yeah, you could, or you could do Roll Tide. You could start a
war
in the comment section.
Okay.
Yeah, there we go.
Could see some Go Dogs in there if we want. Guys, we'd love to see some of that action
the
in the
yellow
comment section.
jackets, is that what the Georgia Tech is?
It is.
Yeah, you went ACC and then SEC, man. Look at that. Attaboy. So, yeah, please do comment, subscribe. All those things really does help out our channel, and we are super excited for our next episode. So, again, thank you, John. Thank you for your time.
Truly my pleasure, gentlemen. Good luck with everything. I know you're going to do awesome.
See you next time, guys.